All
What's
right,
happening,
fair.
everybody? Welcome to another
Let's get
episode of
it.
Unparalleled Sports Talk with yours, Kwame Fisher-Jones. As always, I am him. And I'm talking NBA hoops, so I got to be joined by my man, Sports Talk Terry, on all social media platforms, also known as Everett Terry Jr. What's good, ET? So we are in the off-season,
Hey,
kind of
man,
slow
listen.
time for the NBA. USA just won gold. That topic has been beaten to a pulp. I don't think there's much meat left on that bone to cover. So we're just going to jump right into the off-season preview and start out with the Atlanta Hawks. It's a fun time of the season for me because I like to kind of sit and, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, chastise bad GMing. And there's no better place to start with bad GMing than Atlanta and Brooklyn. So today we start with Atlanta. Andrew Fields is the GM there. Atlanta is a team that had the number one pick in the draft. I'll save that for you because I got nothing good to say about that dude. And they actually don't have a bad team per se on paper. DeAndre Hunter's a good player. Clint Capella's a solid rim running center, but they got a couple other players. His names escape me at the present moment. But the main problem is what do you do with Trae Young and Quinn Snyder? I believe Quinn Snyder's a good coach. I have no problems. Yeah, they've got, how can I forget, Bogdan Bogdanovic. They've got, I mentioned DeAndre Hunter, Jalen Johnson's a good young player, Wesley Matthews, Larry Dance Jr., Cody Zeller, and Trae Young. So they have NBA level talent, if I could put it that way. The problem is I question if they've got NBA level coaching, and it's the monkey in the room with Trae Young. So first, before we get into Trae Young, what are your impressions of the number one pick based on what you've seen on film, how he played in summer league, and how European player, international players transfer into the NBA?
So
Exactly.
this was a horrible
Exactly.
draft, and
Exactly.
I don't really have much else to start with. Um, that's why nobody really wanted the number one pick. Everybody wants the number one pick next year, but that does nothing for you this year.
Yeah.
Um, so this draft screams the Anthony Bennett, Michael Olowokandi kind of draft where it's just like that top pick is just not going to pan out. Um, I don't know that the first or second pick in the draft are going to be impact players at the NBA level, maybe fringe rotational guys on the bench. And for a team that was devoid of that superstar impact playmaker that they thought Trae Young was going to be, they gave up on DeJounte Murray and shipped him away. They needed their Wimbiana. And this guy that they got just, I mean, he so far hasn't shown you that he's it. And so, unfortunately for them, they're going to muddle around about where they are. You know, they're going to be that 8 to 11 seed, you know, maybe make the playoffs and get trounced in the first round. And it's unfortunate because I do like Quinn Snyder. I don't think he's a bad coach. I love Jalen Johnson. He's definitely getting out of there. There's no way he's going to max up to stay there unless he loves the nightlife in Atlanta, which could be a thing.
This is the thing.
Um, the Trae Young thing is just such an albatross for them
Yeah.
because everybody around the league knows he's the worst kept secret in terms of his attitude, personality, and fit, his ability to be coached. And I was always the one that said you needed to ship him to San Antonio with a no nonsense hard coach that could command his respect and get the most out of him. But they didn't. They went with Chris Paul, who's more of a safer veteran who's going to properly teach good habits to Wimby and would be able to fit within Pop's system perfectly and effortlessly without having to get screamed at and what are you doing and you're killing us, etc. So they went how they went. At this point, you almost have to give up on Trae Young and take pennies on a dollar to get him off the roster because it's the only way you can get rid of the culture that apparently he brings. Now, while he's not had any issues off the court per se, his play within the style, his hostility towards coaches, getting coaches fired allegedly, you know, those are all things that, you know, make you wonder if he's a cancer in the locker room and the kind of guy that you can build a franchise with or around. In my mind, he needs to go to a team laden with veterans. I think Miami makes sense because they need
Same division,
a
though.
guy that
Same
can
division.
space the floor, knock down shots. I know. But when you're thinking about where else can he go, there aren't a lot of teams that are pining for a six,
That's the
two and a
thing.
half point guard that doesn't play defense that can shoot the three. Not as good as Steph Curry, but
Yeah.
good. So it's like but he has an attitude problem. So where are you going to put him? I mean, most teams have a point guard, and trading him for them doesn't necessarily make them infinitely better. Like I said, unless you're talking about a team like the Lakers, who would have made sense because they're a veteran squad, Bron's not having it, and they could reel him in. But even in that, they didn't have the chips that Atlanta wanted to get him off the roster. So what's the move? You're not going to give him AR-15 for him. So what's the trade? You're going to give him a bunch of scrap and a couple picks that are like in 2035. Like, they don't want that. So it's hard to figure out where you could ship them. And it sucks because if you remember, and everybody remembered this, people called the day of the draft trade when Luka went to Dallas and Trae Young went to Atlanta. They said that trade was going to have franchise altering implications. And you look at what Dallas has done, and you look at what Atlanta's done outside of the year that they upset the Sixers. What else have they done in Trae Young's career? Nothing. So, salty part because they've had enough talent to win, and they just don't.
Well, you mentioned a lot. For me, it all comes down to one thing: 22 and 32 with him on the floor last year. 22 and 32. If I'm not winning with Trae Young, then I'm not going to win as an organization. You mentioned San Antonio. I'll go out and say there's no place to ship him to. He's only 25 years old, but he's got, I'm drawing a blank, but he's got multiple years in the league. So while he's still young enough where you can fix the maturation, you wonder if he's dug in enough on his style of play. Conversely, though, Atlanta would be better suited keeping him than just allowing his contract to go. Because if you're 22 and 32 with him, you're not even going to make the play-in. I think the phrase now is playoff, play-in, or lottery, which team are you? They're lottery bound. They're better suited to keep him rather than taking back bad contracts, taking back players, and seeing if they develop. You have DeAndre Hunter, who's had a problem staying healthy. You got Bogdanovich, who you can flip for a top 15 pick. You can get a top 7, top 5 protected pick for Bogdanovich. Milwaukee wanted him before they snagged him. You know, they've given Trae everything they need to be successful. Unlike you, here's where we differ. Like Quinn Snyder as a coach, I don't think he's the right coach for Atlanta. I don't believe he's the right coach for Atlanta. The record shows you he's not the right coach. The fact that they're not willing to pour into the team shows you he's a stopgap coach. Atlanta is a man without an island? Is that how it goes? And just another thing on Trae Young. And we lost Everett. He'll chime back in a second. He'll come back in. Another thing on Trae Young. The big issue with Trae Young is he's not in that circle. You know, Trae Young would have fit beautifully on the Olympic team or the World Cup team. They went with Jalen Brunson. Trae Young doesn't get any opportunities for the All-Star game. He made one All-Star, I want to say 1 or 2 All-Star appearances. But again, he's been passed over. He's on that island by himself. And until he finds a way to jump back in, until he finds a way to be a guy, he's a 3-time All-Star. Until he finds a way to either be in the upper echelon and stay there, you're always going to be losing with Trae Young. 22 and 32 is unacceptable for a guy at this juncture in his career. The Hawks, a few years ago, you mentioned they beat the Sixers. And when they beat the Sixers, the thought was that they had reached a level that most people knew they hadn't reached, but they decided to jump in that and keep building. And then the next year they struggled. Well, in that struggle process with Trae Young, he's been passed in the hierarchy by Jalen Brunson. He's been passed, and just in the Eastern Conference, Jalen Brunson, he's been passed in the hierarchy by Tyrese Maxey. So now you're looking at it, and Donovan Mitchell joined the Eastern Conference. You know, he's better than a Darius Garland, but he's regarded in the same space. And the best fits for him, whether it be in Miami or Orlando, they're in the same division. So if you're in the same division, why would we want to help the Hawks find their way? It doesn't make sense. You know, there are going to be more teams that we dig into in the season previews with upcoming teams, but Atlanta's pretty cut and dry. They're not even going down because they're as far as you can go. They're probably going to fight. Vegas has them, or ESPN Bets has them as winning 35 games next year. I don't think they break the 30 win total. If Trae is giving you 54 games, and you're only
Mm.
winning 22 of those, you're really awful without it. So maybe you catch a team that went to Magic City a little later, or had brought the dancers back to the hotel room, on a back to back in the middle of December after you kicked out a bunch of money for Christmas. I don't see them winning more than 30 games. And just quickly, and then we can move on. The first round pick is awful. The first pick is awful. He didn't dominate in the league. He played in. He has no. I don't see an upside there when he figures this out. The guy's been playing international basketball, so he's been playing professional basketball for a minute now. When you waste the top pick in the draft on a guy who's not going to be in the NBA in 5 years, it sets your franchise back. Look no further than Philadelphia. This dude will not be in the
Ooh,
NBA
burn.
past 6 years. And if he is in the NBA, he'll be a role player. He'll be the ninth man on a 45 to 50 win team. So I just want to throw that out there, put that on wax. Now, what are your thoughts? The Hawks are in the Southeast Division. Looking at this division, I really like the Orlando Magic. Paolo Banchero, I think, is a player that
Mm-hmm.
I think is the best player in the division, hands down, over Jimmy Butler. I'm going to say a funny name, you're going to laugh at me, over Jordan Poole, over Wagner on his team. I really like Paolo Banchero in this division. He reminds me, his game, though, was funny because it reminds me of Terry Cummings. Like, and I don't know why I see Terry Cummings when I see Paolo. He needs to be a better rebounder. He's only had about maybe 12 games of over 10 or more rebounds. But I really like the trajectory of this franchise. So for me, a player on the rise, the best player in this division, and the player on the rise is the same thing. Although I want to just double down on Jordan Poole just a little bit, just a little bit. I don't want. I will mention his name just one more time. But other than that, I really like Paolo, and I love what the Orlando Magic are doing. What say you? Looks like ET's having a little technical problems over there. I venture to believe he'll jump in when he's ready. I venture to believe he's going to go with the Miami Heat and Bam Adebayo is the best player in this division. I don't agree with that, but we'll see. When he's ready, he'll jump in for us.
Hey, the audio is not great today. It's cutting in and out, but
Yeah.
I'm here.
All right. Who's your best player in the division? Who's a player on the rise?
So this my best player in the division talent wise is LaMelo Ball, and it's not close. The problem with
Ooh,
LaMelo is he gives
ooh,
you 35 games a year. He gets hurt all the time.
that,
Like he can't.
that.
I,
Yeah.
I mean, am I wrong? I mean, I need LaMelo to show me that he can put up 20 and 10 for a full season. How about half a season? Can we get him? Can we get him to the All Star break or get him after the All Star break to maybe make the Hornets a relevant team? I mean, this kid, and you know what's crazy? The only reason I hold out hope is because there's a future Hall of Famer who had the same problem staying healthy early in his career. One,
Yeah.
Mr. Stephen Wardell Curry, who stayed healthy early in his career and then magically found, the pill of longevity and managed to stay healthy when it mattered for like the back half of his entire career, rarely got hurt. But LaMelo just, I mean, he's got the talent. He's got all the tools to be a great point guard, facilitator, and scorer in this league. But he hurts his ankle, his knee, his neck, his back. It's like, my man, you get hurt waking up in the morning. Like, we think Anthony Davis is frail. At least AD gave you a season or two early on that showed you his talent level. We have yet to see a start and a finish from LaMelo. Either he don't start or he don't finish. Sometimes he don't do either. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate because the Hornets put all their eggs in the LaMelo basket. Remember, they had Terry Rozier and some of those other guys, and they got rid of them. So talent-wise, I think it's LaMelo. But the best player in that division, while Bam Adebayo is a very, very, very good player, it's Paolo Banchero. How can you possibly not go with the rookie who came in and almost dropped a double-double in his first full season and made the Orlando Magic relevant for the first time since Shaquille O'Neal? I mean, people were not looking at Orlando as a team. And this kid came in and became a franchise impact player year one, which is what the Hawks would salivate over if their pick could do it, but he won't. a guy who can come and be a staple, worked hard, did everything right, practically earned an all-star bid his first year and can only get better, does everything well. So that to me is the best player in the division. Obviously Jimmy's still there, but Jimmy's on the decline. He's 35. He gives you 22 regular season games a year, then, pushes through the playoffs until he hurts his knee, and then he's missing every other game, whatever. But that's about where it starts and stops because it's nobody in Washington. I need Jordan Poole just to be a great regular rotational guy in Washington before we consider him best of anything. And there's not really much else in the conference. Yeah, I know it sucks because I thought he was the bee's knees last year, but that's neither here nor there. So, I mean, that's probably the worst division in the association by a lot.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. We'll get to the worst division. The worst division is coming. Well, I don't know about that. But two things, and I love the LaMelo Ball. Injuries are contagious. And when you're in a bad franchise and a bad organization, which the Charlotte Hornets, Charlotte Bobcats are, he's going to often be injured. You have to change the culture there. The problem is he's a young guy. He's got his money. He's got his fame. He's got his celebrity. He's got his all-star bird. And they were a team in flux. Adding Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller was better than I thought he would be. They're picking, ESPN's got them at 29 wins. I think they'll be better than that. We'll see. I'm going to take out a flyer and say we'll see. Just one more note of Banchero. Banchero's already got an all-star game under his belt, all-star appearance under his belt. It's going into his third year. He needs to be a better rebounder. But what he and Mosley have created, and then adding KCP, Orlando should be a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference next year, especially if Embiid continues to do what he does and getting hurt. Cleveland battled the war of attrition last year, managed to thrust into that because of Cleveland and New York. New York will be better. Milwaukee, provided they're healthy, which is a major if, will be better. But I really like Orlando to take the world by storm next year. I especially love what Banchero is going to do with expectations under his belt. A lot of times expectations and disappointment run parallel with one another. This feels a little different. This kid feels like he's got the competitive fire, 20 points, 20 plus points a game.
Mm-hmm.
And Eastern Conference, that's seeing Giannis go down, seeing Embiid go down. And what I mean by go down is injuries have caught up to these guys. Unless I'm forgetting somebody, and check me on this, the most formidable forwards in the Eastern Conference are quickly Julius Randle. You're talking Jarrett Allen. So
Jalen Johnson.
That's his. That position is it. That position and that conference is his for the taking if he wants it. Look, since we're having audio difficulties, I'm going to save NBA Versus for next week. Once we have better audio reception and are going better, because I think it's a great topic and it's something that we can jump into. So I'm going to shut it down then. So we agreed a lot today. Trae Young is just kind of there right now. You think they should trade him? I think we should keep him. Paolo Banchero's best player in the division and a player on the rise, which is an interesting concept to have. And Orlando will probably be the best team in that division. Real quick, Jordan Poole. Washington added some players this year, some veterans. The spotlight's not on Poole. Everybody can't be wrong about this guy. He was a good player. He was one of the reasons why the Warriors won a championship. I'm going to be watching him this year. I'm not going to say I'm expecting him to have a great year, but I'm going to be watching him this year. I don't think he's Ben Simmons 2.0. I don't think he's a disaster. This kid has got something there. So I just want to say, comeback player of the year, possibly. Possibly comeback player of the year, possibly most improved. I think there's an option and a opportunity there for Jordan Poole because nobody's expecting Washington to do anything. They'll probably be one of the worst teams in the NBA this year, but they'll be competitive, which sounds odd, but they'll be competitive because they do have competitive guys on that roster. But Atlanta was one of the worst teams in the NBA with Sadiq Bey, and he's coming off an injury. But Kyle Kuzma's still on that team. I do. I really like Joe, and I like Kuzma to be moved. So those are my things. Anything you want to add to that before we jump out?
I think that the Wizards are going to be terrible again. I do think Jordan Poole will have a better year, but I still don't think that he'll have the Golden State Warriors year because the only way you can do it is you have to take a step back and do the work and realize, you know what, I was the problem. And Jordan Poole doesn't strike me, unfortunately, he's got some light skin in him and he doesn't think he's the problem. Like we typically don't think we're the problem. And so he's got to own the fact that it was him. He was the reason that he had failed success last year. And so, in order for him to turn the corner, I think he has to recognize, you know what? I just need to play ball. Shut up. Don't do too much. Don't force it. Don't act like I'm the team. Just go out there and do my job. Be a professional. Come to practice on time. Don't look to start arguments with teammates or puff my chest out. And just play ball and do what got you your $100+ million contract. And if he does that, then he can turn the corner and start to be the guy that the Wizards traded for versus the guy that they were trying to get rid of months after they got him. We aren't talking years. They were trying to punt him after months. You got to be bad to get punted out of Washington. Okay. So, like I
Coach,
said, I think he
GM,
can turn it
and
around, but it's going to start with him and his attitude.
the coach, the GM, and their most recent top five, top 10 pick were all kicked out of the city. So that to me kind of says something about accountability. And maybe Jordan Poole may take something. That's it for this episode of Unparalleled Sports Talk. If you like the podcast, please you share, subscribe, comment, whatever your podcast platform allows you to do. We will see you next week where we introduce, or maybe this weekend, I don't know, we'll see. Where we introduce a new something that I'm excited about called NBA Versus, where we pit some of the legends against each other. That's Everett Terry, aka Sports Talk Terry, on all social media platforms. Until next time, we appreciate your time here. Be easy.